Okay. The web page language is HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. There's other language used, including JavaScript, but most web pages are displayed themselves with HTML. They may be created other ways, but the final result that's displayed on your computer is usually HTML. Web pages are displayed with what's called a client-server architecture. Your web browser, which is Chrome or Safari, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, whatever you're using, is the client. And when it wants to display a web page, it asks for that web page. And various web servers respond to that request. And in the process of displaying one web page, there are multiple servers involved because the first query says, where do I go for this? And the second query, after it knows where to go, says, okay, I need to display this page, what's on it? And then it has to ask for all of the pieces. It isn't necessarily that the server shows everything immediately. So there's a lot of back and forth in terms of displaying a web page. And then in terms of web page design, there are two types: static, which is fixed HTML, or dynamic, which is a page created on the fly by the web server. A static page is written in HTML and saved on the server as an HTML page. And when the client asks for it, the server sends it and it's complete. Most of my design work up until a few years ago was static HTML. A dynamic page is created on the fly using another language and frequently a database to track all the information, so that when the client asks for a page, the server sees that it's a program. It actually executes a program that says this is what to do to display the page, and then sends the resulting information back to your computer to display. Dynamic web pages are generally created with content management systems, and refer to them as CMS because it's faster. And that's basically server that lives on the web, software that lives on the web server that's used to create and manage the whole creation and storage process. It has all the tools and organization information, and the user doesn't need any knowledge of web programming to use it. There's typically a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, editor that the user uses to create the page, and there's tools. And I've always said that in the content management system that I use, if you can use Microsoft Word or something equivalent like that, then you can use that content management system. It's no more difficult. In fact, it's probably easier than using Word, because I find that Word has gotten more complex since I started using it 30 years ago. Content management system is broken up into two parts called the front end and the back end. The front end is the part that actually displays the web page that the user sees. The back end is what's used to create the page and save the content on the server. Most CMSs are free open source programs. They're designed to be, lost my place, excuse me. They're designed such that anybody can get the source code, modify it, but the actual CMSs that are in public use, they generally have a group, which is the official manager, that control what goes into the actual published version. So You could modify a CMS for your own use, but you would have to submit the changes to the group to have them incorporated in the real published CMS. One of the things they're designed to do is to be easily expanded for more functionality. And I'll get into that in a minute. And some popular CMSs are WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla, and the exclamation mark is part of the name of Joomla. Okay, WordPress is the most popular of the CMSs used today. It's estimated that over 455 million websites, or about 35% of all the internet websites, use WordPress. And this is obtained for free from WordPress.org. Later on, we're going to get into WordPress.com, which is something different. It's related, but different. WordPress is designed so that what you create will display properly on any screen, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, or a computer or a projector. It recognizes the specs on the screen and provides the proper display. It will actually change the way a page is laid out if you're on a cell phone, so that instead of being wide, things are stacked underneath each other. WordPress also has specific features that help to organize a blog. And I'll show you that when we get into it. But the WordPress creates links to recent posts, recent comments, and then essentially has pre-formatted searches that appear in a sidebar as, for example, by date, or since WordPress allows you to assign a category to a post, you can say, I want to see all the posts related to this category, and it lists the categories. So it does that automatically. You don't have to think at all about that. Basic appearance of a WordPress website is controlled by a theme. You can think of a theme as a template, but it's more than a template. It controls the entire display, and you can go to the WordPress site, and they have about 9,000 free themes that you can download and use. Additional functionality for something that's not a part of the WordPress core is done by what's called a plugin. Think of a plugin as like an app that you add to your cell phone. If your cell phone doesn't do something like a banking app, you can add a banking app to your cell phone and do your banking from your phone. That's just like what a plugin does to WordPress on your website. The WordPress website offers more than 50,000 free plugins. Many designers who create themes and plugins offer paid versions of them that offer additional features and functionality and more support. So they make their money by getting you interested in the free and then buying the better extended version if you need additional features. There's 4 elements that make up a website. There's a domain name, which is the address used to find a website. There's the website hosting, which is just storing the website on a web server to make it available on the internet. Then there's the design, which is the graphical design and other functionality, functional elements, such as the navigation and search features. And then the actual content. And I'm going to skip some details here, but in the notes that Sharon has, I have gone into some detail on the breakdown of a domain name into various pieces. So the domain name, the full length of the URL, which I'll cover next, tells the server what you want. Okay, what is a URL? URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, which is the complete address of a unique resource on the internet, whether it's a web page or an image or something else. When you use your browser, at the very top is an address bar, and that will display the URL of what it is that's being displayed. A typical URL might have an example of http:// and all these slashes are critical. It doesn't display without that. It's very picky. So cool.example.com/path-to-files/index.html. The protocol is HTTP, which is a hypertext transfer protocol, which is what is used to actually move the data from the server to your computer. And then there's a secure version of that, HTTPS. Then there's a subdomain, which is cool. And a subdomain in a server can be an entirely different website than just the domain name itself. Then there's a file name and the language, in this case, index.html. Index is the default homepage. So if you don't see an actual name, then what's being displayed is on the server as index. And HTML says the page is being displayed in HTML. It could be JS for JavaScript. And excuse me, there's a couple of others. In the domain name, in this case, the sample example.com, the com is the suffix, which is called a top-level domain. And it's meaningless to you other than to know that com, net, org, bez, edu, gov, mil are all different top-level domains, and they're all managed by different groups. And those groups seem to set the minimum purchase price or control the availability. For example, I cannot register a com, I can register com, org, biz, net. I can't register gov or mil. They're controlled so that only government organizations or military organizations can register them. The file location, the path to files, can be multiple levels of files with slashes between them. That tells the server where to find that page on the server. And then finally, the index.html. Okay, I'm going to go into a little more detail about domain names and website hosting. Any questions so far?
So Lawrence, in terms of the domain names, if you're using one of these different tools, that will automatically be set for you. You don't have to worry about doing all of that, that it can help you, like if you're using WordPro.
Yeah, I'm going to make an exception for the domain name, and I'll cover that when I get into domain name and hosting.
Okay.
But beyond that, the CMS does everything. You create the page and the images and whatever else is there, and it stores all of that stuff and brings it back. And that's really the reason for the database, is to organize that. So it goes to the database and said, where do I find this and this and this and this and this, rather than have all of that pre-written and stored on a page. So it makes the storage a lot smaller.
Jill, you have a question?
Yes, I actually have a website of my own, but I use Wix, Lawrence. Can you tell me how Wix fits into the,
I will get into that in a minute, or
oh, good.
maybe I skipped over it. Let me look back at my notes.
Yeah,
No,
Jill,
that's coming up.
yeah, I use
Uh,
Wix.
Yeah. Okay, good. Those are both good questions. Thank you. I'm going to get into the section that talks about domain names and hosting. And these are both services that that have to be available on the on the internet to display your web page. So a domain name is unique. It's registered by an approved domain name registrar, and it has occurring annual fees. It's owned and controlled by the person who has registered it. The domain name registration is a public record. So there's a service called Whois, WHOIS, and the Whois will display the domain name registration for each domain name. And if you don't want your information in the public record, and I tell you, I get tons and tons of spam email and spam postal mail because my name is on the registration. There is private domain name registration available for an extra fee. And there's a lot of people will pay, depending upon who it is, $10 or $15 per year additional to keep their their information off the public record. And in that case, the domain registrar has a name. And if somebody says, I want to send an email to that domain, or I want to make a request to that domain, that goes to the registrar. And if it's spam, they kill it. And if it's a real legitimate request, like maybe somebody wants to buy your domain name, then they forward it. Some examples of domain registrars. I mean, there's probably hundreds of registrars, but GoDaddy will register a .com domain name for $19 a year. Domain.com will do that for $10 a year. Network Solutions is $25 a year. I can register domain names through a company which is really a reseller for GoDaddy. So I am a GoDaddy reseller. I can register a domain name for you in your name or private, and it's really through GoDaddy. Okay, free hosting is available for a personal website. Usually ads are displayed on your website to support their free hosting, and customization options may be limited and support options may be limited. Some of the free hosting platforms use a proprietary CMS. And generally the free hosting platforms only use a shared domain and subdomain. So rather than have your unique domain name, you would have to have something like, and I've got an example coming up, rocktowncameraclub.blogger.com, or something similar to that. So WordPress, Blogger, Tumblr, Weebly, Wix all offer free hosting. Now, normal hosting with a domain name, you get dedicated server on a web space, dedicated space on a web server for your website. You use a registered domain name. You can get email through your domain name. There's no ads, and generally hosting is paid monthly. I've shown what the annual cost is here just because domain names are registered on an annual fee. And so GoDaddy.com, you can register a domain name and host it for $111 a year. Bluehost is very popular for people who do blogging because they have a lot of resellers that recommend Bluehost. They say Bluehost is the best. Bluehost is so easy to use. Bluehost is more expensive, $147 a year. ShenValleyOnline.net is my server, or it's my domain that I use to register and store stuff on my server. And that's $99 a year for a static site or $135 a year for WordPress sites. And oh, I skipped something here. I'm sorry. Back to your question about Weebly and Wix. They are proprietary content management systems. I have multiple times in my career had to move websites from Weebly and Wix and also Joomla to my server so that they can control it better and do more features. And I basically have to redesign it because you can't copy that from there and move it. If you have a WordPress site, you can move that to any server in the world that has the support for WordPress, which is almost any server in the world. Did that answer your question about Weebly, Wix?
Well, I know it's not as user-friendly as the Word ribbon, but I just wondered if there was any advantage to keeping Wix or not.
So I right now I'm hosting two sites, or I'm the webmaster of two sites in Wix, and it is incredibly easy. I think what Lawrence is saying is that picture it as your domain hosting is the puppet master. And if you want to give your puppets to someone else to have them dance, that all the strings, when you go from Wix to another one, you have maybe your puppets, but you don't have any of the ability to make it work right. So, but if you've ever been to the Shenandoah Valley, Northern Shenandoah Valley Audubon site, I did that in Wix because I inherited it that way, and it's the amount of templates in there. There is a photo template. It is really easy to use, but we do have the paid version, so we have our own unique domain name. But it wasn't that expensive, and especially if you buy it on an annual basis. So I think it's less than. You can start with a free version, like almost all the apps, as Lawrence was saying. You start free and you go, oh, this is really great, but now I need it to do this, or I don't want the ads. And then you can upgrade it. The support on Wix is really good. I once like destroyed the whole Audubon site and had a few moments of terror, and they got on the phone with me and helped me go back a version. So, you know, it's again, what you want to do. The bottom line, if you're doing any of this, is how do you keep generating interest and content on your site? And it just depends on what you want to do. And we can talk at the end of this whether maybe we can even experiment with a site for this group and have everybody come in and do some authoring in it too. So that what we want to do is whatever one you pick, say, how do I get content out to the world to share photos? So that's a longer answer to Wix. Wix is a Google product too. So the advantage of Wix is that it will help you promote it in a Google search. Your site will come up higher on the list because Google owns it. And you know, once Google owns something, they tend to favor it. So
Other you made a very good point there about their support for your Audubon site. And because it's a paid version, the support was probably better than a free version.
Yeah, it was really, I was really impressed. They really did help me. It was quick. particularly because I don't know what I did, but the site was just spinning into oblivion, and I'm like thinking, you know, especially it was the first venture in doing a lot of web content where I didn't have my own web. I have a webmaster in my company. So I was like, I don't know what I did, but they were able to restore it. You know, what we're talking about in these dynamic sites is just picture all your content is in there, almost like, you remember the old arcade games where you had like, there were all these neat toys there, and then the thing came down and picked it up. That's what these CMS or content management is, that it's coming in and you've got all your elements stored in this database, and it's coming in and picking up the things you need and putting them together in a logical order. And so the advantage of these dynamic sites is that you just have a lot of content that is stored. So on the Audubon site, if I am going to post something new, I just go in and every photo I've ever uploaded to the site is there for my being able to use. I don't have to go and create it like page by page in a book. It's a database. It's a big file cabinet. So
you made another good point there. In my hosting, my server has features that are common to almost every web server. Every website has a daily backup, a weekly backup, and a monthly backup. So every day it backs up and saves a copy of that for a week. And then it saves one weekly copy, and then it saves a monthly copy. So I can go back for 7 days or up to 7 days, or pick a week or pick a month and restore that at any time. And it only takes me a couple minutes to do that. So that's all built into the hosting. Okay. So I'm now going to talk into starting your photo blog. And there's 2 slides that really are just a summary of what goes into starting it. So questions to ask yourself so you know how to focus what you're doing. What is your passion? Why do you want to start a blog? What will make it a success? Who is your audience? Is there a message that you want to convey? And do you want to make money from your website? And then the various steps are to decide the focus of your blog. Set your goals. If we're talking photo blogs, you're going to do something to feature your photos, but maybe you want to blog about nature photos or landscape photos or portrait photography or anything, street photography. Any particular narrow range could be your focus. Mine is primarily nature and landscape macro. Doesn't say I won't do more, but that's the primary focus. The next thing to do is select your blogging platform, which reminds me that I didn't mention something I had meant to. I'm going to skip back. WordPress.com is a free hosting site for WordPress. It uses the WordPress software, but it doesn't have all of the free templates and all of the free plugins. It's very limited as to what you can do. So you can host a website with WordPress on WordPress.com as a subdomain, but you don't have all the tools available to you, all the features, all the different themes that are possible that you would have on another server if you had a paid hosting. So sorry for the digression. Third step is select a domain name. And what that really means is find out what you would like your domain name to be, and then see if it's available. Sharon could, for example, if she wanted to do blogging, she could look for sharonfisher.com which is probably not available. But if she used her initials, she might find it is available. The fourth step is to actually buy a domain name. And usually the selection, you go to a domain registrar and search for a domain name, and it'll tell you if it's available or not. And if it's not available, it'll offer you some options, or you can put in some additional things to see if you can find something that you like. Fifth step is to select the website hosting. That's assuming that you know you want to be paid or free, do one or the other, and then find who you want to use for your host. Once you have a host and you have a CMS, select a theme that matches what you want your site to be. Create a logo if you want to have a logo. You don't have to have it, but the CMSs all support having a logo, which becomes a part of the design. And then the last step is, once you've done all of that, you start creating your essential pages. So before I start my next section, which is to talk about my personal blog or our personal blog, are there any questions? I guess not. Okay, I'm going to answer the questions that I asked before. My passion in photography is landscape, nature, macro. In terms of why did I want to start a blog, I wanted to share my photos and other thoughts and interests with others. I've had a lot of people over the years say, I like your photos, but that's because they saw them hanging in my living room, or I sent an email with a photo. Nobody ever gets to see your photos normally unless you publicize it. So my website is a success when other people appreciate the photos and acknowledge my efforts. I get statistics for how many people visit my website. It's hard to tell how many there really are because I visit it so often myself as I'm working on it. But there are thousands of visitors to my website. And then who is the audience? Our audience is anybody who's interested in my photos and thoughts, and anybody who might be researching the same topic or location that I have written about or photographed. And then what message do I want to convey? I believe that every photo has a story, so I want each post to be a complete story. I talk about where we were, why we were there, information about the location, background information, some interesting things. I put in links to it. I put in additional photos. I put in some technical details about the photos. And then we're not trying to make money from our website. If you go to our blog, I do have a little shopping cart there. I have some note cards that I made up from photos that people can buy. I have not sold very many, and I don't think I've sold any through the website. I've sold them through eBay. I've sold a couple when photographs are displayed locally. Somebody has bought some cards. Other website pages I created. When we started the blog, we wanted it to be personal but private. So the background information only includes our first names and a generic location like Shenandoah Valley. I've included information about my cameras, lenses, and the software and apps I use in my photography and image processing. And that list keeps growing as I get involved with more and more software for post-processing. And then I included a contact form so a reader can reach me without knowing my name and my email address. They fill out a form and it comes to me as an email. When I start a new post, I either select a photo that I want to feature or I decide a topic that I want to write about. I've actually done book reviews on my blog because I was so impressed with the book that I wanted to share it. So if I pick a photo, then I start writing, I write a possible title, an introductory paragraph or two to get started. And then I work on expanding it. I do some research to learn more about it and write it some more. Then I go back and read what I wrote and rewrite it. You can always change the title. Even after it's been published, you can change the title. So I go through this in an iterative process. And then if I start with an image, I look for more images that are related to whatever that is. If I start with a topic, I look for images that I already have that support it, or I go out and take some pictures to support it. Excuse me for a second. When I research, I pick up pamphlets where we are. Give you an example. I'm going to hold this up. In October, Beverly and I were down in North Carolina to Sunset Beach and the Outer Banks. And this is what we picked up related to where we were. So I have different pamphlets and brochures that I can refer to help me either learn more or remember. I also do internet searches for more background information. I find some interesting things by looking at maps. So I use Google Maps to learn more about what's in the area. I use Street View to remind myself where I was. When I get into, I'm working on a post for the Outer Banks where we took the ferry from somewhere to Oracoke to do photographs of a lighthouse. That ferry trip was free but long because it makes a great big detour around a protected area. Google Maps shows where the ferry route goes, which I wouldn't have known just by riding the ferry. So this is an iterative process that as I find more images, do more research, I both add to and revise what I've already written. And then one of the last things I do is I write what's called an excerpt, which is a short description of what the post is about. And that excerpt gets used in two places. On the home page, I have a summary of the posts, not the actual post. And in the publicity, the excerpt shows up in the publicity, and I'll explain how when I actually get there. So when I'm writing about the subject, I think I've mentioned most of this, why we're there, background information, factual details, links to other websites, and the excerpt. Okay, the typical organization of a post is the featured images at the top, and that replaces the header image of the website. Then the title of the post, then all the text. Then I put in a photo gallery with more images. Then below that, I have an additional information section, which has links to important sources and other resources. For example, I may have found something that tells a lot more detail than I want. I'll put in a link to that so that people know that if they're interested, they can go there. A lot of my sources are things like Wikipedia. And then I have a technical data section where I provide information about each image. And that would include things like the time and date, which camera and lens, the exposure information, the image size if it's cropped. If I have the GPS location, that's included. in case somebody's interested in how or where I took the photo. And I should mention that I had attended a video presentation where somebody was saying, when I do street photography, I take a picture with my camera, and then I take a picture with my phone so that I can get the GPS information off the phone. Well, I have an app on my phone that tracks where I am. If I turn it on, I think the default that I've got it set to is 25 yards or 2 minutes. It will record where I am. So I can come back and the software on my computer related to that say, this is the file with the photos from this trip, and this is where we were. And it'll match the time from the app to the time on the photo and write the GPS location to the metadata on the photo. I don't have to do anything if I've used the app. Greatest thing in the world if you're interested in GPS. And then my primary publicity is through Twitter and Facebook. I actually abhor both Twitter and Facebook. I never look at the news feed on Facebook. I do post things occasionally. Beverly follows what my family does and tells me when something's interesting is going on, or what friends of mine are doing. But there's a plugin on my website that will send, when I release a post publicly, it sends the excerpt and the featured image with a link to Twitter. And then once that's on Twitter, I copy that and I paste it into Facebook as a new post in Facebook. And I've created a separate Facebook page for the website so that I'm not putting my personal Facebook page out there, because again, I want to keep our information private. Are there any questions? I am, other than showing you my blog and a little bit about it, I'm done with my presentation. So this is my contact information. Feel free to email me. Feel free to call me if you have a question. I don't answer my phone. You'll have to leave a message. If my phone doesn't tell me who's calling, I don't answer it. Any questions so far?
It'd be great to see an example from your blog.
Okay, I'm going there now.
Okay.
Okay, this is the home page of my blog. I picked a theme that has, if you can see my cursor, it has a narrow image vertically at the top, so it doesn't take up the whole page, so you can see more of the page.
Can you expand that page so it's filling the?
Oh, sorry.
There you go. Great.
Okay. Thank you for that reminder. I had meant to do that, and that got undone in going back and forth, getting out of Zoom and back in. So navigation is across the top. This is a link to this page, which is all the posts. Note cards is the cards that I mentioned that we offer. The about is background information about us. More information. It has contact form, information about cameras, lenses, equipment, information, definitions of various terms, software, and apps. The name of our blog is Blinspirations, which is BL Inspirations, and that's Beverly Laurie Inspirations, or her name, my nickname. And then there's a little thing, photos and more, which describes the purpose. So down here, this is the excerpt for a post This is a thumbnail of the featured image. On the right-hand side are links to recent posts. These are recent comments that people have left. These are the searches that say, show me everything that's categorized as architectural or astronomical or something to do with clouds or something that's involved with focus stacking or something that's a national or state park, something that sunrises or sunsets, for example. Then last is archives by month, ever since I started in February 2018. So if I click one of them, it'll show the posts from that particular month. So if I go here and I click iridescent clouds, or I pick that, now there's my feature photo, which is colored clouds that we saw out our back door one afternoon looking towards the sun. That replaces the featured image, or excuse me, the header image, so that you see a larger view of that. Then I've talked about, we saw the clouds, describe a little bit about how they're formed. And in about a 3-minute picture, I took seven pictures. So I have to go the opposite direction because my arrow is covered by Zoom. So these are typical photo gallery. And then additional information, what causes the clouds, Wikipedia, and then this thing here on iridescent clouds was actually a technical description of how they're formed. And then finally, here is the technical data for each of those exposures. Let me find something which is more like a national park. Well, here's one. It's a state park. So this is a picture I took of fungi on a tree branch up at Seven Bends when I was up, Beverly and I were up there with Sharon. So again, I've talked a little bit about why we were there, a little bit about Sharon. Here is the items on her list of things to look for. And I talk a little bit more about the background of the park, how it came to be. There's some links to additional information. And here are the images I took that day that I liked. So this is a Google Maps view of Seven Bends, so somebody can appreciate what it's like. And this is the satellite view of the same thing. And this is a picture I took years ago from the Woodstock Tower, looking down at Seven Bends before it was a park. And the colored stuff down at the bottom are a couple of hang gliders that were there that day but weren't flying. This is a close-up of an autumn color in a leaf. Some berries on whatever it is, I forget.
Pokeweed.
Yeah, pokeweed.
Yeah.
Close-up of a flower, sort of close-up of a flower, but I wanted to show the buds and the various stages, so I got more than just the flower. And I couldn't identify that, and Sharon identified it for me, and I really, really appreciate that, Sharon.
So that's a really important point I want to talk about for a second. Flower identification is that your end image might want to be just the flower and the buds, but the only way, given the commonality of a yellow flower in this sort of floret, and is I had to look at the leaves. So I had gone back the next weekend or a few days later and Lawrence had told me where it was, and I found it. So when you're doing something with flowers, make sure you get the leaves also. If you want to later identify it, doesn't mean you have to include it in the picture, but two things, the leaves, and if you have something that you can do relative scale or size, that really helps. But we
Yeah.
did finally identify it as tick seed sunflower, because there's just a ton of yellow flowers in the fall like that. And you know, so that's just something, again, if as you're trying to tell stories or do things, is make sure to try to capture the height, the leaves, which are really important for identification. So.
And I didn't mention it, but in the lower left-hand corner, I have my title of the photo and then additional description, which in this case is what it was on Sharon's list that we were searching for. So each of the photos has that information down there. So we got extra credit for an amphibian, and we found a little Fowler's toad. So this is something that starts with an I and something that's an amphibian. So it met two different categories on Sharon's list. Excuse me.
Yeah, that day, the amphibian, the toads were out. I had done a search before 2 days earlier and found some toads, and I was just hoping that 2 days later they'd also be out and available. So not easy
He was
to find them.
pretty well buried in the grass.
Yeah.
Now this is close up of some fungi on an old fence board. Feather on the ground, something that shows features or patterns, something about birds. So that's my, now there's some like, oh, this is the featured image on the blog, but it's not the order. Usually the featured image is the first thing in the blog, but I did a different order on this. This is something that you or other animals eat, which is soybeans. So there's some small, still green soybeans there.
Yeah.
Now, there's something that pollinates. There's another flower, which is wingstem, and that's a bee on the wingstem. And there's a moth on wingstem. And there's another bee on wingstem showing more detail of the flower and the leaves. These are geese on the river. Again, something about birds. Something about birds, something in the sky. There's a hawk went over. I've been able to specifically identify the hawk, Sharon. I don't know if you can or not.
I think from looking at it, it's got a belly band. And so my guess is it's a young red teal based on the belly band. And the reason it's got stripes, it's either a red tail or a red shouldered. I'd have to blow it up a little bit more and look at it. But the two common hawks of that size in this area are red tails and red shouldered.
Okay, I can blow that up and look. I wasn't able to tell between them, so I didn't make a decision. And if I blow it up, I can send it to you.
Yeah, if you do that, I'll be able to identify it for sure. The difference is the chest, but there are lines on the tail, so I'm like leaning red, maybe red shouldered. So.
Okay, and since I took this, I've got some Topaz software which will help me blow it up without getting pixelated.
Yeah.
So I can use that if I need to.
Send it along and I'll ID it for you.
Okay, thanks. This is something in the sky. This is just clouds looking between some trees. Another view of clouds. Beautiful day we had there. Absolutely gorgeous day for photography. And then something that makes you happy. And that's the love sign at the entrance to the park.
And if you haven't been to that park, that love sign is from some of the original barn wood that was on the property. It's a great park.
When were we there? That was last summer, but I don't remember exactly
No,
when.
I think it was October.
October, so it was in the fall.
Fall, yeah, because Wingstem is a fall plant. It might have been the end of September.
I have the dates in the additional information. When I get out of this, I can get back and get that.
Yeah.
But I like this because Beverly and I have been married about 4 years at that time.
Aw. Yeah, no, it is a great park. And, and what impressed me is that, after the day being there, instead of having just some awesome pictures of different things, it really threads it together and tells a story. And it sort of inspired me to say, wouldn't it be great to be doing a little bit more with the photos that we're collecting as a group too, especially those folks that are part of Master Naturalists, to be able to get that information out, to really connect people to the natural world around us here. It would be a fun project to do.
I don't have the technical information section in here. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I can look up it.
Well, I've got it here.
Yeah. And, and I know we presented a lot of technical information, but WordPress and also Wix is incredibly easy to use. What I find with Wix sometimes is I did a page I'll pull up after we're done with this one on local birds for Audubon. And what I ended up doing is using a gallery feature. Sometimes you have to say, I want it to do X, Y, Z, and of the templates that are here, which ones can I force it to do what I want to do? There are some limitations. What Lawrence has here is this is his Lightroom. And in Lightroom, he also has folders on the left and keywords. So it would have been around September or August. I'm just looking at your 7 Bends. I see it, the September 18th.
September. If I could count, I would do better.
Yeah, there it is.
So yeah, so it's September 18th in the afternoon. Took my first picture at 1:40 p.m.
Yeah, which we were lucky that there was a little cloud cover, because that way it wasn't terribly sunny and difficult.
There's one that didn't make it, but there was a hornet's nest.
Yeah, paper wasps.
Yeah, I didn't get that in a direction that made it stand out, so I didn't include that.
Yeah.
So, so I took the love picture on the way out, and that was about 2:47. So the whole thing was just over an hour after your introduction. Very worthwhile.
It was a great day for being able to capture things. Any questions? Is it easy to pull up like just a template in WordPress?
Well, let me do that this way.
it really is like filling in the blanks.
So there's a theme for photography, and you could put your own picture in place of that picture.
Unless you want to be that woman.
Right.
It's like going in the old fashioned frames with the families. You can have your own like perfect family.
So all kinds of options available. So it says there's 9,121 free themes right now on WordPress. And if I look at plugins, there's 59,879 free plugins. So there's, if you can imagine it, there's probably a plugin for it. And then you have a whole section of workshops and lessons, courses, videos. Just a ton of information is available for free through this site. And then there's hundreds and hundreds of websites dedicated to WordPress that will tell you how to do it. And one that I have used a lot in the past is one called WP Beginner. So when I've searched for something, WP Beginner frequently shows up as a place to get good information. Beverly just came in with a good note. One of the things that I do is all of my photos, when I post them, I put a little copyright notice in the bottom corner that says either I or Blinspirations own the copyright to that, and I claim that in the footer of the web page. And I've taken protection on my website that people can't copy things from the website, because I once had a client who was an artist, and she had photographs of some of her artwork on her website. This is a static HTML site. And she went to a, one of these little, not a yard sale, but where a bunch of people get together to sell stuff, forget what it's called. And she found some of her artwork for sale, miniatures of her paintings for sale. Somebody had copied it from her website and printed it and was selling it. And so I've got a plugin on my website that means that they can't copy it. If I try to drag across this to copy it, you can't do it. You can't select it. I can't right click and see the image. The only thing I could do is do a screen capture. But you see the copyright and Blinspirations here that I do on everything that I publish. If I'm displaying a photograph that I've mounted, I don't. But I do it, anything that's online has this. And that's primarily for my protection. And the way copyright works, you don't have to register it. All you have to do is claim it, and it's yours. And if anybody copies it, they're in violation of federal law. You still have to find somebody to enforce it, which costs money. But if somebody is trying to make money off of your stuff, you have a recourse. Sharon, is there anything else you can think of?
I'm gonna pop over
Sure.
to, I'm gonna share my screen and the Audubon site just to let people know. So this is a Wix product. I think everybody might be able to see it. It's fairly easy to put together, but the one I wanted to show you is in resources. I did a bird identification guide. And I'm wondering why my pictures are coming in fuzzy. Wait a minute. Here we
There
go.
you go.
Yeah,
Just takes time to build.
local birds. So these are all my pictures, and what we did is we wanted to be able to feature local birds of the different areas. And what I figured out is there was a gallery view that was in Wix as a template. And so when you roll over, it's pretty cool. It identifies the bird. And if you click on it, it gives you the quick description and a link to the All About Birds site. And this was fairly easy once I figured out what template to use, how to put it together. And you can go bird by bird through the site, and it's a nice resource to have. And then if rather than have a lot of detail here on our site as Audubon, the All About Birds site, which is the Cornell site, has more about each species. It has the recordings, it has the maps. What we wanted to do is say, here are different birds that you will find in the backyard. And then I want to do one on hawks. This is my little mama bird coming in to feed the baby at Blandy at the boxes. You know, give a little love to the starlings. They're here. And we just wanted that bird because it is one that's commonly here. And again, this is why I love birds in the snow. This is taken probably out my window. You know, this was taken at the fence at Sky Meadows. I love these two mourning doves together because they're sort of, the one on the fence, I think, is the boy. He's displaying and saying, "Don't I look wonderful?" You know, cardinals in the sun, in the snow, they're just beautiful. And again, through my window, he's waiting to come to one of my feeders, but you can almost get the snowflakes on him. That was really pretty cool. These are northern flickers or yellow shafted flickers coming in and out of a nest box. Northern mockingbird, this one was probably taken at State Arboretum. These are, again, through my window. I've got my suet feeders on these wooden branches that I can find from different places. And this is a immature and a mature male sort of fighting over the suet. This is our red-bellied woodpecker, and again, he's on my suet log. I'll probably out the window, or maybe I was outside. Red bellies started to come in a little bit. The pileatids are so shy. If I'm outside, they won't come to the suet. But the nice thing about this red belly is you can see a little bit of the red belly on its bottom here. And this male is really pretty. He's got red under the chin where you don't see. A lot of people don't know why they're called red bellies, and it's because of the little red that you get on the belly. This is a red-shouldered. I think this one is at the State Arboretum too. The way you identify red-shouldered in flight is that you can oftentimes see windows up through the wings. This is a red teal. I might have enhanced the sky a little bit on this one, in full disclosure. Red wings, and our red wings tend to be here even in February. They start to come in, and I love when the male red wings are displaying. Our ruby throats that we're here through October, and I always say that I have to get my taxes done because they'll only come back after I submit my taxes on April 15th. So I start putting my feeders out the end of March just in case. But it's hard to sometimes get that throat lit. You have to have the light coming just right. There's a sharp shin that comes in. This is through my window also. It comes and visits my feeders, unfortunately. Again, birds in snow. I just love this titmouse. He's got the snow right up on his beak. I probably, again, through my window. It was sort of gray with the snow coming through. Definitely get the birds. This is a turkey vulture that I took from a photo blind in Texas, because a lot of times you don't get that detail on the turkey vultures. You don't get the feathers, and this is taken with a 600 at really high speed to stop the wings from blurring. So we have two types of guys that you're going to see, the nuthatches. We have two. We have red-breasted, which is really uncommon. If you've got one, take a picture of it. I love them. They're a little bit smaller than the white-breasted, but these guys are so cute. The white-breasted will go up and down trees both ways, where the creeper only can go up and is tiny and is very camouflaged. But just as an example, I started by having this goal of saying, how am I going to display these pictures? And, I'm sort of stuck with this format. It won't let me pull that titmouse over to the nuthatch. So, I'm sort of stuck with the template that's here, but once I figured out what I was going to do, it was pretty easy. And then I was able to arrange them in alphabetical order. And we can then add to the site. But this site also has a blog feature, if I can remember where to find it. And I did a blog on the Sky Meadows Sensory Trail. And so this one doesn't have the same amount of flexibility as, I'm just looking out the window because a turkey vulture just flew by close, but it doesn't have the same features of Lawrence's blog, but it's fairly easy to put together. In here, there's just the picture, and then you can have other recent blogs. This is when we were having the disease. This is Belinda Burwell's picture when we had that unidentified one. But this is fairly easy to put together. You tell the author the date, how long it takes to read. But again, you can pick different formats for the different pages. So, all in all, this was my first complex way of doing it. This is our red-headed woodpecker from a neighbor's house that had a nest. But this is where we post the different newsletters. So fairly easy to use. If in the old days when we first started doing web things, to have to program something like that would be really difficult. But like with any templates, like templates that you use in Photoshop or in word processing, you're limited to the different templates. You just have to get creative in saying ahead of time when picking it, what do I want to do and how am I going to put it together? So
That's one of the advantages of all of the plugins in WordPress, that you have such a variety. I mean, if I wanted to look for photo galleries, there's probably 1,000 different photo galleries available.
we've got a note in the chat from Barbara that there's some courses that are offered for $10 that walk you through the entire setup. So look at the
Good.
note in the in the chart from.
I would like to ask a question of the participants. Do you
Mhm.
think that what I did was too technical?
I thought it was great.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody
I'm not
else?
sure how much to share, but from my experience, you can start without knowing the background, but if you have a problem, you're lost. So it's always helpful to know some of the background before you start.
It's sort of like, you know, if you've always used a calculator, then you don't know when you look at the register and you say, no, that can't possibly be that much because you didn't ever learn math. So what I think it's always helpful to know the background, but I think the other message is don't be scared by the technical
No.
part. This is really easy to use, and
Mostly, you can just do it and it happens. You know, I'm in the business of designing and hosting websites. So I need to understand that when I have a problem. But if everything goes well, you don't need to know it.
This is Barbara. I thought it was a good overview. And if I find when I take sometimes I take technical courses, and if it's something you don't need to know, at least you've seen it before, and maybe you have an idea of what they are talking about. So I thought it was good to include.
That was my thought for including it, was you're not going to learn it, but you have at least been exposed to it.
yeah. And Sid's also saying there's a lot of free videos on YouTube on how to use the different ones. Missy says, thank you. You explained it very well.
Thank you very much, everybody.